SBC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily Podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
iGaming Daily's magical mystery tour of gambling conferences continues as we bring you today's show live from SBC Summit Tblisi in the heart of Georgia. As 2,000 professionals gather to discuss the Central and Eastern European and Central Asian markets, we will assess the potential of the region and ask what operators need to do to make the most of the opportunities they offer. And it wouldn't be a week of iGaming Daily this autumn without talking about what is happening in the UK. So, why are both Evoke and Entain both threatening to divert investment from the UK to other markets? Welcome back to iGaming Daily, supported by Optimove, the creator of positionless marketing and the #1 player engagement platform. I'm Charlie Horner, and today I'm joined by our editor-at-large, Ted Menmuir, and our media director, Martyn Elliott. Ted, how's things?
Very well, Charlie. Glad to kick off this podcast, having me kicked out of the interview zone by Italian World Cup winner, Alessandro Nesta. So, a bit of drama, guys.
iGaming Daily versus a World Cup winner. I think there's only one winner, I think.
Yeah, I mean, judging by the standard of our office five-a-side team, I think we have to sort of bow down and just take that, really, don't we? So, I will say this, though. Nice to be back on the podcast after a bit of a break. And nice to be here in Tbilisi, which is my first time here. It is stunning. It really is one of the most beautiful cities in Europe, I think. Well worth visiting. I would highly recommend it. And we're not even sponsored by the Georgia Tourist Board.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a beautiful city, and I'm very jealous that you get to spend a bit more time here later this week. Let's dig into things then. On the podcast in recent months, we've had a lot of doom and gloom stories and about Western Europe. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. But what are the vibes here at the Sheraton? Is it more of an upbeat mood to help offset the doom and gloom of Western Europe? Ted, what do you think?
I'd summarize it as, it is more upbeat than Western Europe, but that's not difficult as kind of markets stand. I think what the general kind of EE public recognizes is that, look, a lot of markets, even in Eastern Europe, are in flux, and they are facing kind of generational revisions, and they're at a point of which route do they take, and what kind of new compliance factors are they going to add in. Again, it's one thing that I don't like to do, especially when it comes to Eastern European markets, is kind of generalize because they're so different individually. However, there are kind of binding narratives. One of them is kind of a key protections of players under the age of 24, especially because these are younger economies and with a different profile to Western European markets. And then the other is, again, taxation, which policies they go around. It's not necessarily all negative there. And also how they're going to apply kind of new rules that affect the competitive makeup of each market. Again, you have to kind of look at this individually from market to market and from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but they are kind of banding narratives there.
Yeah, something I really like about these regional events is that you get to really dig deep into these smaller markets that, we don't get to talk about as often on the podcast, and it's interesting to see some of the intricacies of it. Martyn, you were meeting plenty of people on the show floor yesterday. What sort of vibes were you getting?
Well, I mean, looking at things from a slightly different perspective from Ted, because my job tends to be working a bit more with suppliers and so on. One thing that really stood out is the number of startups or companies less than 2 years old here. All of them have got, everyone we spoke to had a pretty impressive tech offer. Some of it's around KYC, lots of gamification type tools, other marketing tools, various platform providers who I'd not come across before. But it looks like a great culture here to start a business. And I think part of that is there's a lot of countries in this region who almost reset their education system maybe 20, 25 years ago to focus more on technology and rather than traditional education. So they've got a massive advantage in terms of the skills they've got here. So it's a great place to invest, and it's quite encouraging to see number of people are investing and starting businesses here in our industry. So, yeah, exciting times.
Very innovative region, probably something that we could learn a lot from back in the UK. And you see in different cities across the region become hubs of iGaming. There's plenty of offices in Sofia, there's Tbilisi and Yerevan, and there's plenty of companies who are setting up in this region. So if you start to look at things a little bit more deeply, Ted, what are the biggest and most competitive markets in this region? What makes them stand out above the rest?
So a lot of interplay is going on at the moment. The one that for me, actually, the markets that stand out for me, we've been reporting on these. Romania, for starters, it's been a problematic year, to say the least, in Romania in terms of its governance. There's been pretty much a scandal month to month, and there's a real kind of loss of kind of regulatory trust in the Romanian governor of the ONJN, the gambling office, and from there is a lot of issues that have to be sorted out in terms of the licenses, taxation, and also who manages the governance, whether that gets transferred to a different ministry. We've seen Romania come under a new government. And then if we go further kind of east, the other thing that we're seeing is that we're seeing huge ruptures in the Balkan market. Croatia and Serbia coming up with new gambling laws. Montenegro has just relaunched their gambling regime, and Bosnia and Herzegovina are looking to settle that in time before the end of the year. Again, it's funny how there's kind of interconnections between every market, right? But at the same time, they're all kind of individual, and they're all kind of answering their own issues and their own concerns regarding gaming. These are kind of subjects that are always kind of close to home, and they do kind of like blend in with what we've seen in Western Europe. However, I think that there is a different approach to how they tackle them.
I do find it incredibly impressive, Ted, how you seem to know exactly what's going on in all of these different markets at the same time, and listeners can keep up to date with that on SBC News. One thing that I find really interesting about this region is that they are all very separate, smaller markets. But the big global groups like your Entains and your Flutters are in this region. They've taken slightly different approach to it. They've mainly getting market access through M&A deals. We've got like MaxBet and AjaraBet, Supersport, STS. Why do you think that these brands are looking to acquire these like local hero brands to get podium positions in these markets?
I think it's fairly simple. It's money, really. I don't think you can underestimate how difficult it is for a foreign company to come into any of these markets, understand the culture, recruit staff effectively, build a business from scratch. That takes a lot of time, a lot of investment. These guys have got shareholders to answer to. They want not necessarily returns tomorrow, but they have to, the boards, the C-suite has to be able to say in 12 months' time, our entry into X market is paying off. So this just makes a lot of financial sense. And some of these deals are big, but actually some of them in global terms are really reasonably affordable, I think.
Yeah, I'll add to that, and I think the other dynamic here is look, there's good value, but again, even with all these issues surrounding these markets and these kind of peculiarities, it comes down to like they are growing, and I think especially for the European PLCs, the Western European ones, is that I think that when you look down at the macro level of each European country, that each Western European economy that you're in, it really, comes to play that the markets are starting to stagnate. You can't just be in Sweden or the UK or Spain. You have to kind of move abroad. And these are the dynamics that are being played out.
Yeah, it's interesting that the Entain and Flutter are both going down the M&A route. I was listening in on a panel yesterday where there was a representative from Entain talking about their acquisition strategy. And then Superbet were also on it, and they have taken the Superbet brand from Romania into Serbia and Bulgaria. and Brazil. It was interesting to see how they were researching and putting all the work in to go from just Romania to Serbia, which is you would assume they might have some similarities, but also lots of differences as well. Ted, you mentioned earlier that there's lots of regulatory evolution in certain markets. Does this region risk falling into the same pitfalls as we're seeing in Western Europe on regulation, on tax?
Yes, and I think that's what I mean when I was talking about a market in flux. And I think one of the key questions for operators in this region is in what direction do they go? Because one of the things that actually concerned me yesterday, there was a lot of kind of easy narrative of like, we should just follow the Western play. But another opportunity here is that, look, we're going to have the Middle East and UAE and just the close geographies of that region. And if that region comes into play for global gambling and not, whatever kind of remit they take, right? That's a huge opportunity. And they're in a much better position to advance there than I'd say your big tier ones in Western Europe trying to access that market. They've already built the technology. They are very kind of like self-reliant here in terms of their services and their infrastructures. So that could be a huge, huge win. There are massive, massive questions to be asked about the compliance and kind of the enterprise and the anxieties there about kind of money laundering and how kind of they kind of iron out these issues in the next 5 years. But the opportunity is clear. It's just what passage do these markets take?
Ted has summed that up pretty well. I'm not entirely convinced when you look at the industry that markets learn from each other particularly. Everyone's got their own local dynamics. So, yeah, we will see the same issues that we've seen in more mature markets come here. But the advantage operators now have, these big global operators, is they've more experience in dealing with those issues. So they might actually be better place to do that, when we start talking about stricter regulation, higher taxes, all that kind of thing out here. And they're perhaps going to be better placed to survive that than some of the smaller operators here.
Great. Well, Martyn, Ted, we'll take a quick break and then we'll talk about stronger regulation and more tax.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Welcome back to iGaming Daily. And while we're here in Tbilisi, the political debates don't stop back home. So let's talk about what's happening in the UK, because over the weekend, Evoke, there were stories that Evoke were going to close up to 200 William Hill shops, amid the incoming tax hikes in the budget next month. Stella David has also hinted that Entain might divert investment away from the UK and into other markets amid those tax hikes as well. What does this tell us about confidence in the UK sector at the moment?
Look, on this subject, I really am just at the point where I just want the 18th of November to come along and just settle this matter once and for all. I think now we're just reading kind of the tea leaves via kind of the media. I'm not surprised that leadership came out and put kind of their concerns and anxieties about high street betting shop closures. This budget, I've never seen such a build up to a budget before. Apparently, if Rachel Reeves doesn't land this, it's the end of the industry. It's shop closures. So I think for just everyone's well-being, I can't wait for the budget to be announced.
It seems like we are talking about this on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis at the minute. So I will be glad when it's settled one way or another. Martyn, what do you think?
Well, I am with you. I mean, we're only one step away from some operators starting to offer a market on what the tax rise will be on betting, I think, because there's been so much debate about it. But this is a lesson in how not to do things. The thing that, when you have these stories about there'll be this possibly huge change and they drag on for so long, it kills any kind of investment or planning off. This uncertainty really does huge damage to industries. And I think the government has handled this astonishingly badly. Fair enough. I appreciate that it's probably not top of their agenda. They've got one or two other financial problems that they're going to have to cope with that have built up over the past few years. But yeah, their messaging about it and the sort of kite flying and that's out there to see what the reaction is, it's been pretty poor, really. Yeah, let's have a decision so everyone can move forward when we know what it is.
Yeah, there's no secret that the UK economy is struggling a little bit, and gambling is often seen as an easy target for tax rises and a new revenue source for government. But I feel like the dialogue that we've had as an industry has just been incredibly prolonged. Are threats like this an effective way of lobbying the government, or does it come across as a bit of a desperate plea? Is there more effective way that leadership can get that message across?
Well, I think this would happen in kind of any industry where, if you have like another kind of tax burden added on, quite a significant bottom line impact, you would expect leadership to react. Look, we'll see what will happen if the numbers, like the government, PLCs have to budget. They probably have a best, worst, like mid-range scenario. I think that they're kind of pitching in and they're factoring in, and I think that this has been planned into the accounts. So I am convinced that William Hill and Evoke will make these changes to what is a retail unit that is very much in the ropes. So changes needed to be done. I think this kind of just accelerates the next development of UK gambling.
Yeah, and when the government is so focused on growth in the economy, introducing policies that is going to close down retail shops on high streets that are already, struggling immensely, doesn't seem like a great use of economic policy, does it, Martyn?
Not really. Although I will express a little bit of sympathy for Rachel Reeves, which I know is probably something I don't do very often. She's got a lot of tough decisions to make, and if we want to continue paying for the public services we have in the country and for the huge welfare bill we've got, and just being able to afford to repay our debts when they come due, she's going to make some unpopular tax choices somewhere along the line. And the betting industry is not a very sympathetic target. No one is going to complain about that other than the betting industry, I don't think.
This has happened for the last 2 years. We've had kind of these kind of tax concerns. And what I'd tell our audiences is that they've got to remember that literally when the tax increases get announced, it's only, 2 or 3 sentences. It's just a passage, just like a blog update on the Guardian or the Sun News. It just passes over. I think the other stuff to look at, and actually I tell people to go kind of take a wider perspective, is what does that budget tell you about the confidence in the UK economy? What is the big ticket stuff? Last year, what really affected businesses more was the tax increases in national insurance, and especially for job hires. So I think we need to have a wider lens on what the budget is going to tell UK gambling.
No, of course. And one of the other main lines that the industry likes to use against stricter regulation, more tax, is the black market argument that if you increase regulation, increase taxes, then it just sends players to the black market. And it's something that the Betting and Gaming Council has come out and said in, I think was a front page splash in the Daily Star last week. Does that argument hold weight? And can the industry tell a different story on this? Because it feels like as soon as any regulation comes into play or tax rises, we just immediately go to the black market.
Well, I think there are 2 points on this. The first is it true? Is the black market a threat if operators have to start sort of cutting their offers a bit, having worse odds because of tax rises. Yeah, that is absolutely, definitely true. But does that make it a good argument for lobbying and so on? Not really, because your average punter doesn't really care whether you've got a license. They care if they get paid if they have a winning bet. They care about what their odds are on that bet, the experience they have when they sign up and so on. So I don't think it is an effective lobbying tool. Is it the best lobbying tool they've got? The best argument they've got? Maybe it is. The other one would be how many jobs the industry has and how many jobs might be lost, I guess, if they against it. And then through the supply chain, not just in betting shops, not just in the head offices where they run the online businesses from and so on. But yeah, I think we're just going to carry on hearing this black market argument again and again because until it hits home.
My observation is that it's quite funny how the lobbying came in, the serious lobbying and aggressive stuff came in when at this kind of tax point. Where was it for the kind of UK gambling review? Because it should have started there. And I think many stakeholders in gambling view that the tax judgment will be kind of Labour's play on the outcome of the gambling review, which was considered kind of a very soft touch policy by the Conservatives. As always, in gaming, everything's kind of hyper politicized and politically sensitive. That never changes. I think that we will look at the first 5 years of this decade and as a missed opportunity. UK gambling could have been a lot smarter, and it could have actually kind of faced the problems or faced kind of those issues. One of them being, and I always go back to this, what are the real problematic aspects of gambling? How does it kind of siphon those off and say, look, we're going to tackle these issues? One of them would have been, your high-risk games. Maybe we could have placed a special taxation there. Maybe we could have structured the levy board differently. I don't think we were ever unified as a voice to take on those big issues, and it's going to come back and sting us, and it will do very imminently.
Do we think then that part of this is, parts of government don't necessarily understand the industry and don't understand the intricacies of those maybe special tax measures and things like that, or is it just that the messaging is a little bit off?
Parts of government. I don't think there's a great understanding of the industry. People are mired in a certain moral view of gambling, where let's be honest, there are problematic aspects, as Ted's just been talking about, and so I can understand that. But actually, this is a big tech industry. It's a big contributor to the overall tax take of the economy. Is it 0.3% of tax take is from total tax take is the gambling taxes, and then you have payroll taxes. Occasionally you have corporation tax. I think this is the reason the government wants to go after operators for tax is because so many of them are actually headquartered overseas and pay their, under sort of international tax legislation, pay their corporation tax in lower tax jurisdictions than the UK. Could they have been? Could the government be smarter and have some kind of licensing condition about you are paying your corporation tax on British earnings in the UK? I don't know, but we are probably too late to do anything about the government's plans at this point. I don't think. And to go back to your original question, and I've diverted quite a long way from what you asked me. No. They don't understand the industry. I don't think DCMS is particularly good at managing this brief.
Yeah, I agree with so much of what Martyn is saying. One of the things that I kind of keep on reflecting is that UK gambling is a British sector. It's got heritage names of businesses that are centuries old, and that have come from kind of these towns that need kind of leveling up. That can, you can call kind of success stories, your Bet365s, your William Hills, your Ladbrokes, right? And I think that we never kind of pitched that, saying like, this is a very British industry. This is, born and bred out of the UK and its roots. And, there's a fear of like losing that and losing its identity. The other thing here is is, for example, what's happened in the London Stock Exchange now is loss of flutter. And, maybe a better kind of environment would have been kind of more attractive to tech businesses, which is what the government is always pitching for. And we could have been part of that narrative. There are so many holes that we can poke at, and that's another one.
Yeah, I mean, Ted, Martyn, we could talk about this all day long, and I'm sure we will talk about it again on the podcast between now and the budget, because it's still 5 or 6 weeks away. Help us all, please. But in the meantime, thank you very much for joining us, Martyn. It's great to have you back on the show. And to the audience, thank you very much for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of iGaming Daily for all the latest developments from the global gambling sector.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.